Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate you coming. My name is Karen Peterson. I am Carole and Jim's oldest daughter. My father and I, in the spirit of my mother, have tried to put together an event that I think she would have thrown for herself. I'm more of a storyteller. I have some notes here, but I'm more of a storyteller, and we'll just kind of refer to them about some stories and things. You can see the pictures that are going through of my mother's life when she was little to up until April of last year, when she took her final cruise, and her and I went on the Great Lakes, which was an amazing time for us. We're a very different family in that my mother was a nurse, and my sister, who unfortunately isn't with us, was a doctor. And so 10 years ago, as we call ourselves the family nucleus, we sat around the kitchen table and had very frank and deep conversations about death. If you have this diagnosis, what do you want? If you are going to die, what do you want hospice to look like? And then in true fashion, when you're gone, what do you want your service to look like? And my mother very flippantly said, "I'm dead, it's your problem." So in keeping with her idea of what a party should be, and a party that I knew that she would want to throw, my father and I, again, we conspired, and this is what we feel would honor my mother greatly. There's some people in the audience, and this is hard. This is the fourth family member in 18 months that I've had to do this. It started with my sister in May of 22. It started with John in October, my uncle 3 weeks later, and then my mother. And so I've spoken at 4 services in 18 months. So if I ramble, I'm sorry. It's hard. It's really hard. In the audience today is my father, Jim. Raise your hand. You all know him. My mother's sister, Sue, her daughter, Melissa, my daughter, Kimber, my dear friend and sister, Leslie, my mother's best friend of over 50 years, which is a sister to her, Laura, her daughter, Amanda, and granddaughter, Ashley. So you do not always get to choose your family, but you can choose people in your life to be family. And so there are people here, Laura and Leslie, that are truly family members to us. As I said earlier, my sister died in May of 22, ironically from the very same thing my mother died from. They both had a brain tumor. My sister chose some aggressive treatment, and she lived 18 months, and my mother didn't have much time at all. Carole Louise Larson was born March 5th, 1939 in Aurora, Minnesota. My mother was the second. Why are you shaking your head no? Okay, then I got the death certificate right. She wrote it wrong in this document that she had outlined her life in. Okay, well that's pretty good. At least I'm not having guilt anymore about, God damn it, I got that death certificate wrong. Anyway, she was the second of 3 girls. Her older sister Jan and her were very close in age, and then there was an 8 or 10 year time difference between Sue and Jan and Carole. And so just imagine these, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds with this little toddler and young child in Minnesota. They lived on a lake. My grandfather cut the trees. He honed the logs. He dug the basement with a shovel. The house was on the main floor, had a living area with a kitchen. They had a bedroom on the main floor, and then the upstairs had 1 bedroom, and then eventually a 2nd bedroom. They had electricity, but they had an outhouse, and they had to go to the well to get water. This is northern Minnesota. I saw a picture one time of snow like this deep up to the back door at the 4th of July. Yeah, it was cold. It was really cold. But they were not always very nice sisters to Sue. My grandfather went off to World War II. He was in the Pacific on a destroyer. He must have come back with a bayonet. I don't know where the heck that bayonet came from, but he had a rifle, and he put that bayonet on the end of the rifle. And Jan and Carole decided it would be fun to chase Sue around the yard at gunpoint with a bayonet and make her sit on anthills. And then their favorite was January, February, March, March, March. Yeah, so she definitely got into a lot of trouble. There were a slew of cousins. They lived on a lake. There's a picture somewhere in here of her in their rowboat. They loved and adored that rowboat. They went everywhere on that lake until my grandfather got into it, flipped it over, said it was dangerous, and took it away. They were heartbroken. My mother adored living in Minnesota. The school was very rich in money because of the mining community was there. It was the Iron Range in the north. They had an Olympic-sized pool at their school. It was beautiful. My mother went to school there from kindergarten up through her junior year, and my grandfather had this grand idea that the family was moving to California. And that's a long way from Minnesota to Fontana, California. And no matter how family and friends begged Ralph to let my mother stay and finish her senior year of high school, where, tell me if I'm wrong, Sue, I think she was the editor of the yearbook, and she was gonna be a class president, or she was a class officer of some type. The school also being very rich, if you wanted to be in band or orchestra, they gave you music instruments. My mother played the cello and was in the orchestra. And having all her cousins and her friends and everybody in this place for that many years, and then to have to leave, it was soul crushing to her. And I know we talked about it a lot. She does not remember much of her senior year in Fontana. What she did though was conspire and tried to get away from her father as quickly as possible when she was done with school. She just checked the boxes and got out of there. My mother had a lifetime dream from the age of 5 to be a nurse. She wanted to be a nurse. So in high school, she found the Kaiser School of Nursing. It was a 3-year program in which she went to Oakland, California. Hey, we're not close to mom and dad anymore. And went to school there to this 3-year program. And it was a year-round school. I mean, there was no summer breaks. You had a week at Easter, maybe a week at Christmas, a few days off at Thanksgiving, but you went to school, and it was a very rigorous time for her. But this is where she met my father. That's an interesting story. Let's talk about that story. So my mother had a boyfriend, and my father was in the Navy, and they kind of knew each other through a circle of friends. And my mother went to this party with her boyfriend, and my father showed up, and one thing led to another, and everybody's asking, well, where's Jim? Well, where's Carole? They're sitting in the front seat of a pickup truck. 4 hours later, right? Gilligan's Island, 3-hour tour. Well, this is 4 hours later. They had conspired, hatched a plan, and they were going to get married in a week. So my father's in the Navy. He's got to put in for leave. Doesn't have a lot of money. He's in Oakland. He hitchhikes all the way to Fontana. She also said, Sue, it'll be interesting to hear from you about how she broke the news to her parents when she got home for spring break. Oh, by the way, I'm getting married. Doesn't even know this guy. I don't know. I wonder how that conversation went. And a week later, my dad showed up. Helen and Ralph took them all to Vegas, and they got married. A very interesting fun fact is that there's a picture of their marriage certificate here. The same chapel and the same person that married my parents married Sue, her sister, years later. So that was really fun. Yeah, so 4 hours. I asked her why, and the comment was, well, when you know, you know. 63 years later, they were together. So that is truly a testament to some good decision making. So once they were married and came back, my father had 2 weeks on land before he was going out to 6 months at sea. And being married allowed my father to drive or have a higher income. So my mother was still in school, living at the Kaiser School of Nursing. She was saving all that money for the time that my dad was out to sea. And when he came back, she had saved enough money to buy a car for them. It was a Ford. It was a 39 Ford, right, Dad? 53 Ford. And then rented a furnished apartment for them to live in. So my mother graduated from nursing school. She had a little bit of time left, and my father was reassigned to Texas. And he was sent to Beeville, Texas, which is between Corpus Christi and San Antonio. And that was where I was born. I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas. And they lived there for about a year. And my father had put in 8 years in the Navy at that point and said, I was done. He was done. For the simple reason that the Navy said, we didn't issue you a wife. They were not very family friendly. And so that wasn't what my parents wanted. So they came back to the Bay Area, and my father started working at United Airlines. There's a specific license that you need to work on airplanes. It's an A&P, an airframe and power plant license. And he didn't have that coming out of the Navy, even though he was doing that. So he started working at United Airlines. But I realized I'm gonna back up here and let's talk about the time that my mother was there before I was born. My mother actually worked in a hospital. I'm not quite sure if it was in Corpus Christi or if it was in Beeville. It was probably in Corpus Christi. It was in Beeville. Okay, Beeville. And a very different time. This is the late 50s, early 60s, a very different time in medicine, right? My mother very quickly became an anesthesiologist. She became an assistant to surgeons. She was an absolute trailblazer because think of Texas in the 60s, extremely segregated. And my mother would have absolutely nothing to do with that. And that if you were a person that was not Caucasian and you had a baby, you were required to walk the stairs and you were not allowed, because you were put on a different floor, and you were not allowed to use the elevator. And my mother said, push the button, and stuck them in the elevator and took them where they needed to do. And she became a very critical member of the hospital staff there a very short time because she had really good skills and she was very smart. And so she loved nursing there in Texas. So we now moved to California. Let's get back to that. We moved to California, and my father's working graveyard, eventually swing shift. We talked about this at dinner last night. And he's working for United Airlines, 6 months to get the airframe, 6 months to get the power plant, and then decides that he's got his license. Now, he can do whatever he wants. During this time in 1962, we left the rental house we were in. My parents bought a house in Hayward. My sister was born. Kate and I were 18 months apart in age. And my father decides to jump ship and he's going to start working in other places. So my mother decides to go back to work. This was a job she absolutely adored. Of all the jobs she had, she is now the shift supervisor. So when the day crew left at 5 o'clock, she was the supervisor in charge of a 199 bed hospital in the Bay Area. And so sometimes she would work swing or she would work graveyard depending upon what was needed, but she was the person in charge during that time. This was a time when ICU or CCU, critical care units, were being started, and she was a part of creating those for this hospital, St. Rose in Hayward. It was a really tough time. I have very vivid memories of my mother coming in from working swing shift, or excuse me, graveyard. She would be there at breakfast when we were getting ready to go to school, and there would be blood on her uniform, there would be blood on her shoes. Very poignant conversations recently with her about, and I take it for granted, the disposable society that we're in, right? You go to the doctor, they pull out this thing, the sharps, they put it on a plastic syringe, it all goes in a box, it gets disposed. No, it was a metal syringe. The sharps, the needles were reused, everything was sterilized. She said you would have to sharpen the needles because if they got dull, you couldn't go through the skin, and it was really hard on the patients. And so she was, sharing all those stories with us about what that was like. But that was truly a wonderful, wonderful job she had. She met so many people that influenced her as the years went on. So my father's now working for Global Airways, and we have the opportunity as a family to go to Europe. He's going to be a station agent. And we first landed in Scotland, and then things quickly fell apart. And my father, who was going to be with us all the time, suddenly is now on the road. And we're there about a year. And so my mother is left behind with 2 young children. We left Scotland, we went to Germany. During that time period, my mother had an accident and severely sprained her ankle. So my sister and I were like 3 and 4, 4 and 5, having to do things. It's a very different time, having to do things for her. Like she would give us a Fennec, we would go down the stairs, across the parking lot, across an empty field, go to the bakery, get bread, and come back. Or Dad would give us coins, and we'd go to the bar 2 doors down, knock on the back door, hand them the empties, get alcohol. It was a very, very different time in Germany. But my sister during that time period became very, very ill. Not quite sure what she had, but they wanted to hospitalize her. And my dad's on the road, she's alone with these 2 kids. And my mom's like, I can't do that. What am I gonna do I can't leave my kid alone. I can't take my other daughter and bring her to the hospital. Because in those days, you didn't get to go. It was a waiting room and people stayed downstairs. You didn't get to go to the rooms. And so she made the decision to take care of my sister in the apartment. We shared a bed and take care of her there. So my mother was very devoted to us. If you know my mother, yes, she's a very fun and warm and fuzzy person sometimes, but she was definitely a taskmaster, right, Laura? She was a taskmaster, and it was her way or the highway, and she definitely had her opinions. And though she was very strict and stern with us, she adored us and loved us dearly and would do anything for us. Whatever we asked, or of anybody, she would always be there for you. My mother was our Girl Scout leader. She volunteered in school. You name it, she did it for us as kids growing up. So we spent that time in Europe. We were very fortunate for the 12 years that we lived in Hayward that my father just changed jobs at the airport. Left Global, went to Kaiser Steel, and then when Kaiser Steel folded, we moved to Bakersfield. So now we're on the move again. And it was here that my mother joined an organization, an international sorority called Epsilon Sigma Alpha. And ESA is all about philanthropic work. I remember when and we'll get to there when they moved to LA, but ESA is so large and raises so much money nationally and internationally that they actually built an entire hospital section at St. Jude's. And I remember my mother telling stories of when, before it was open, that the ESA group was invited to go there for several days and tour this hospital wing that they built. It was like 10 stories tall. And so don't discount the power of a bake sale or selling flowers or whatever. It all adds up to the big picture. So we're in Bakersfield. It is idyllic. We have a swimming pool in our backyard because our parents want our house to be the house to be. That's where we fell in love with and met the Stringers. They came into our lives, and it was wonderful. But in corporate aviation, things don't last long. And we were all there for about 3 years. We went to Boise, Idaho. The Stringers went to Seattle, Washington, but thank God it was only an 8-hour car drive away. We saw each other a lot. And so we had our lives there. My mother did bedside nursing, continued bedside nursing in Bakersfield when we lived there. And then when we left and we went to Boise, my mother suddenly is working an 8-to-5 job. Like, how come you're working 8 to 5? I asked her this recently, and she goes, I got tired working shift work. I wanted to be like everybody else. 8 to 5, Saturday, Sunday off. I'm like, okay. Had no clue. So she worked in utilization review, which is where you take a look at plans and how the membership is using the plan. Case management, maybe you have a bad accident or a disease, she helps you manage things. And so that's what she was doing when we lived in Boise. Boise was a really great time for us. The draw for my sister and I is we could ski, and we skied a lot. Again, my mother left Bakersfield, went to Boise, continued doing ESA work, and just about the time that we were getting ready to leave Boise, because that job finished after 3 years, my mother was just about to be elected the state president of the state of Idaho for ESA. And that was really unfortunate. She had put a lot of time and effort into that. It was unfortunate for her to have to leave that. But she continued on. So they left Boise. She had her time there. That was, though, a time when my mother really started excelling at gardening and canning and sewing and doing things. We had a beautiful backyard and a beautiful garden, and I'll never forget all the canning and the tomatoes and the shelves in the garage, and the neighbor who found this giant pile of onions that was abandoned, and they were we went down there and got all these onions, and remember those chopper dicer things that you stick the onion in and it comes out, and the dehydrator going and the garage smelling, and oh my God. But hey, we ate well in the wintertime, unlike other people. We just kept eating all year from what we grew in the garden. This was also a time where history repeated itself. And my father, that job ended, and my sister was a junior in high school, and they were moving to California, to Southern California. And my mother was not going to have a repeat of what happened with her in her senior year. So my sister stayed behind. My parents moved to California. I stayed as well, which was great because we continued skiing and doing the fun stuff that we always did. And then when my sister graduated from high school, I loaded her up in my Volkswagen and I drove her down to Dominguez Hills where my parents were living at the time. And this was a great job because the Stringers are back. And that's where the party fun started. And the international travel and all the different things. My parents bought a motorhome and they did all kinds of motorhome traveling. My mother really wanted to see the world. The Stringers and my parents went to Europe many times together. You'll see a lot of pictures in here of my mother with a beer because her goal was to drink a beer in every city when she was in Europe during a certain period in her life. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but
she succeeded.
And she succeeded, yeah, you'll see, and another beer, and another beer, and another beer. But what was really cool is she continued UR and CM for Little Company of Mary Hospital in Long Beach, and that job had connections, because what happens in Long Beach every year in the spring? The Long Beach Grand Prix. And that's back when it was Formula One cars. And she was in with Bauer Ambulance, and we would have access to the drivers, to the pits. We had our own VIP everything there, TV, food, a booth. I mean, it was amazing. The primo seats, that was a cool job. That was a cool job. So Jim and Carole are traveling with the Stringers. They're doing their motorhoming thing. My mom is extremely active in ESA. That's going on. She's, doing all these different activities. And then in her 40s, in my mother's 40s, she starts having some heart problems. And they're really having a hard time nailing down what it is. She wasn't very well. Excuse me. And she made this flippant comment, if I make it till I'm 50, I want a marching band and 50 balloons. But you need to watch what you say in front of Karen. So my mother turns 50. My father and I again conspire for another event. A wonderful donation is given to the high school in El Segundo. My sister and I blow up 50 balloons. We get her to a park where I don't remember if you were there, Jan was still alive. We're all there having a good time. Suddenly the 50 balloons appear. She's got a big smile on her face. And then you hear the band off in the distance marching into the park. We didn't think they'd ever stop. I have no idea how much you paid them. It must have been a big donation because they just would not stop. But she was super happy. There's pictures in here from that event. And she kind of figured out the heart problems and things continued. But yeah, be careful what you say in front of me. In 1989, as all things happen, the flight department folded. Luckily, the Stringers got to stay in the Bay Area, the Southern California. He was able to get a job locally, but my father then now has made his way to Oregon, and he's working for Nike tennis shoes. I know in talking to my mother, that first year was very, very difficult for her. Again, she was very entrenched in her community. My mother was very, very much an advocate of you get out of community what you put in community. And so my mother taught me at a very early age to volunteer and to do things. In Bakersfield, does anybody here remember old mimeograph machines? Ka-chunk, 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 the stinky, inky smell that you peel it off and you don't want to touch anything because you'll be stained. And you cannot make one mistake on that mimeograph paper because it's a mistake forever. You can't erase it. Yeah, and we would do that in the kitchen in Bakersfield. How many do we have to make? 400! No! Yeah. So she's up here. They landed in a rental. I know we talked a lot during that time. I was in Southern California still, pregnant with their first grandchild, my first child, and it was just a really difficult time for her. It's gray, it's wet, she's not used to this weather. But once they built a home, and once that home was built, then the sky was the limit. She just really excelled and took off. She had a job doing utilization review for some insurance company in the Lloyd Center. She'd take the train every day out there. Mary Ellen, when did she start volunteering for you guys at St. Vincent's? Do you remember? I know that at some point she started doing, and I think it was she must have been when she retired at 62, because she had time. But she started doing volunteer work when she retired at St. V's. She was there for a very, very long time. But this is also where my mother started, and she did this work in Southern California. Easter seals was her passion. And if you've ever bought tulips in this area at the week before Easter in the last 30 years, my mother had a hand in that. My mother, for anybody that's an old timer here, also had a hand in an organization called the Children's Shop. And I can't remember what they raised money for, but it was some philanthropic organization revolving around kids. They would find retail space they could rent short term from October to January. They had buyers that went out and bought things, and it was a place to go in and buy Christmas presents, for yourself, for your family, or whoever, but then the proceeds went to the Children's Shop for this organization. She was very involved with that. She would set up the store, she would be cashiering there during the holiday time. I remember many times during Thanksgiving going to the Children's Shop and buying Christmas presents for my family. She was busy with ESA when she got here, but not as much as she was in Southern California, because she was doing the Children's Shop, because she was doing Easter seals, and because she was looking at retirement. When my dad was 65 and she was 62, they retired. They had upgraded to a new motorhome. At one point, my mother had this bright idea, let's travel the country in a motorhome. Let's be gone for months at a time. They went to some ESA convention in St. Louis. Once they got there, they realized they wanted to come home. They were not gonna be traveling the country for a long time. Also, I know when my mother worked at St. Vincent's, she made baby onesies, baby blankets, and baby hats. And they would donate them to the nursery, and babies would go home with them. And then starting in October, she would make giant Christmas stockings. And so babies that were born in the holiday time would go home in a Christmas stocking. And when I went through my mother's things, I found the pattern for the Christmas stocking. I also found some other notes about the onesies and the different things she made. And her and my father paid for all of that out of their all the fabric, all of that they paid for on their own. It wasn't like they were donated, here's this material, go do this. They bought the material, she made these things. My mother was an amazing sewer. She had upgraded to, at the time, a new Viking machine. which was in its day an amazing machine, which I inherited at some point, and I used it, and it had all these fancy stitches, and she made beautiful things for my daughter. My kids when they were in preschool, and they had to have a blanket with their name sewn on it. She also got into toll painting at this time. You name it, she crafted it. And then she got in, and then about 8 or 9 years ago, we went to a quilt show together. And she fell in love with the machine. Oh, this machine was beautiful. It's called a dream machine. And it's like a computer on steroids with needles. And it is gorgeous. And she was just like, oh, I gotta talk to your father. I really want this. I gotta talk to your father. Maybe he'll let me buy it. I really want this. So she got her machine. And there are examples on the table of some of the things that she has made with that machine. There's a quilt that I found. The quilt there, it's a Hawaiian quilt. All the material came from Hawaii. And Sue was telling me that the other item that's there, that's this pineapple, they each bought these applique packages when they were on a cruise in Hawaii. My sister and I, for 15 years up until she died, went to Hawaii every year in the wintertime, and one year we took our father. And so Sue and my mother went on a Hawaii cruise because, hey, we'll just one-up you. Fine, you're not gonna take me, we're gonna go on a cruise. So, so she was, again, she just went crazy with the things that she made, and then she started making lots of things, and we went to craft shows and sold stuff, and it was really fun. My mother, if you didn't know, was a master canner and food preserver with Washington County. And I can't tell you how many times I visited, and that's the days where you could forward a phone number to a phone, and she would have to man the phones over, a period of time. And we would get questions about, I'll never forget this one. Oh my God, this woman. I have weevils in all my flour products. I don't want to throw them away. Can I put them in the freezer and will they die? Yeah, but you're going to still have weevils in your flour. That's okay, they'll bake out. Yeah, that was a good one. And turkey questions at Thanksgiving. So many turkey questions at Thanksgiving. That was, yeah, we didn't know there would be so many, like, how to thaw them, how to cook them. Can I just put it at a low temperature and slowly turn up the heat and then slow cook it to make it, no, just stick it in there. It'll be good. But yeah, so she definitely enjoyed that aspect. She had a garden. They lived in town originally when they moved here, and then they moved out to River Road, which is where the American Legion had many, many 4th of July picnics after the parade. My mother was an American Legion auxiliary member with my father, who was a regular American Legion member, I think for 30 years. Just about the time that they moved here, they joined that organization. And I found recipes where my mother took the recipe, and in the margin it had measurements for 50, for 75, for 100, taking this recipe and making it for them, for a lot of them. I moved here 11 years ago in March, but there was many years before that, the hamburger hot dog nights, the ham dinners, the early Thanksgiving dinner, all these things that she did at the American Legion. She was very devoted to the Legion. She loved the group of people that were there. She was a president several times, I believe. In fact, she was getting ready to, in the next few years, move up to becoming a president again of the auxiliary. She really, really adored that organization and spent a lot of time there. And then when I got here, I started cooking in the kitchen. And then the funny part is that they went on a cruise, came back with COVID. It was the ham dinner, and the vegetarian made the ham dinner for the Legion, and I brought a friend in to do it because my mother couldn't be there. So it was pretty funny. So they decided at some point to get rid of the motorhome and exclusively start traveling via cruises. One of the cruises that is so memorable, and there's many people here today, the Shavers, Laura, Sue, Kimber. My parents, because they took off after 4 hours and got married, never really had a big wedding. So for their 50th wedding anniversary, they put together a cruise, and 18 people went on this cruise to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. And we had a party for them. It was the Shavers, Sue and Larry, John and Laura, Kimber, that were there. And this is where you'll see a lot of selfie pictures in here. This is where I started the selfie craze with the old people. And so they were like, there's pictures in bed, there's pictures in the bus, there's all these selfie pictures. But this is where when I was putting together the slideshow for that event, my mother was great at taking pictures of the tree, of the cannon, of that tree and the flowers with my dad. There's the sea. There was no pictures of her. And so really think about that, you know. There's no reason why you can't stick the phone up and put your head in it, or hand the phone to somebody. They're not going to steal your phone. Get pictures of yourself for your family. They'll greatly appreciate it. So we now have lots of pictures of her. It was my mission after that, when I put that together, to take photos of her. My mother also adored Hawaii. Kauai, the island of Kauai, was her favorite place, and she went there many, many times. Though there was the trip with the stringers and the bird poop. They parked, so there was a hurricane years before, and what happened were all these house birds got loose, right? Well, it's a tropical climate, so they just went crazy and reproduced. And they loved this one tree. They didn't know that. They parked the rent-a-car underneath the tree. And then the car was white the next day when they came out. It was really bad from what she told me. It was really bad.
It don't clean easy.
No, and it does not clean easy. Yeah, and it was a rent-a-car, so they didn't park under that tree the rest of that trip.
Under any tree.
Yeah. I did not know that my mother wrote journals when she traveled, and there's on the back there on the memorabilia table are some of her old passports, and there's journals. Please feel free to read if you want to read things. But I found that when I was cleaning stuff up, that she journaled. But here's a list of the 40 places that she has been in the world, and she's also visited almost every state: Ireland, Scotland, England, Iceland, the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, Russia, Finland, Sweden, Estonia, Tunisia, Italy, Spain, Mexico, Jamaica, Krakow, Nevis and St. Bart's, Australia, New Zealand with the Stringers. That was an amazing cruise that they went on. Belgium, France, Canada, Croatia, Greece, Guernsey, Costa Rica, Luxembourg, Denmark, East Germany, back when it was East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Turkey, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Isles, Wales, Northern Ireland, Panama and the Panama Canal, and Hawaii. Her last cruise we took last year in April, and we went on a Viking cruise of the Great Lakes, which was I made her feel like she was a queen every day. Every day at 4 o'clock, I brought her a glass of champagne. We had so much fun. I made her do things that were out of her comfort zone. At the end of the day, she was happy she did them. I told her, if you're gonna go, you're gonna be at the front of the boat when we go to Niagara Falls. You're gonna get wet, but I don't care, you wanna see it. You gotta be there, you can't hide inside. She did it. And then Viking has these expedition boats, and the seats luckily are hydraulic, but you gotta go down into the boat, and it's the lake, and it was, of course, we had to choose the week. It was 50 and like snowing every day. Sideways wind, but she got on the boat, she went out and did her thing. There's a picture of her in there doing that. That's my father's 80th birthday party. So her last cruise was very, very memorable. And then after that, in June of 23, my father and mother took a 3-day, really nice train trip from Moab to Denver, Colorado. So I'm getting to the end. I have a poem that I'm gonna read. And then I'm gonna leave it for you guys to come up here and tell stories about my mom, because she's my mom. She's not Carole, she's my mother. I'm sorry I keep saying my mom, but she's not Carole, she's Carole to you. But I would love to hear tell us stories about your adventures with her, or things that she said, or things that she did. It would be fun to hear those. So, I am learning how to live. I am learning how to live in a new way since that day you were taken away. I am learning how to live with the things left unsaid, knowing I got to say them with every tear I shed. I am learning how to live by embracing the pain, knowing that you will live on through the memories that remain. I am learning how to live, knowing that I will never again see your face, and I have peace knowing you're in a better place. I can't thank you enough for being here today. This is a party that she would have truly enjoyed being at. And I will just leave the mic here if anybody wants to come up and talk.
I don't like to go up there, but I'll just tell one short story. We lived down the circle for, we both lived the last 10 years or so. And I had arranged to go on a trip to the Union Airport. I had arranged for transportation, and it's getting later and later. It's supposed to be like 5:30. It's supposed to pick me up in the morning. But they come. I'm out walking on the circle of the street, trying to think, they around the corner, do they have the wrong house? And so one time I walk around the corner, and Carole's coming out of the house. Chuck, what's going on? My transportation didn't arrange for me to go to the airport. I'm a little worried about how I'm gonna get there on time. I'm thinking to myself, I gotta drive, and I gotta park, and all that. She says, well, okay, I was on my way to the gym, but why don't I take you to the airport? Okay, and I'm thinking, as we're going across here to the airport, it's not too bad at that hour going to the airport. On the way back, though, I know she knows she's gonna have this traffic to getting into the airport. But that's the kind of person Carole was, and willing to do something for another person. She also served on the board of our little HOA, and was a very positive influence person on that board, which when I was there, I was the president. But she was level-headed, thought straight, and there was a great knowing her. And I'm glad I got to hear your story, because of course I only knew the last few years of her life. But thank you very much.